Imagine a world where the elegant symbol of the American auto industry, General Motors, suddenly turned its back on the American dream, and didn't even apologize. This wasn't a glitch, a fluke, a cold, calculated move, historic rupture, a resounding business slap in the face of a president who swore by tooth, nail, and, yes, tweets, to protect the nation's industry. GM announced it would cut 14,000 jobs and close 5 plants. Where engines once roared, there was now a void, shelves were empty, and factory doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. And then Trump, the man elected on the slogan, "Returning glory to the historic worker," was caught off guard. No conferences, no press patriotic photos in a construction hard hat, no grand proclamations like, "No worker left behind." It would almost be poetic, if it weren't so tragic. The man who spent 4 years shouting, "America first," was devoted to the symbol of the country's once great industrial might. The irony is that GM didn't just run away from the battlefield, it switched fronts. Trump talked about tariffs as a magic spell to return America to the gold of the 1950s. General Motors poured more than $20 billion into electric vehicles, batteries, research, and artificial intelligence. While he chanted, "American cars for Americans," GM was mapping a future where borders no longer mattered. Contrasting, almost American, Trump is at war, threatening 2% tariffs to force automakers to return to the US, while GM unveils a new electric car in Shanghai, another in Munich, a third in Sao Paulo. Robots hum in factories in India, engineers test their developments on the internet, and investors smile, because money does not sing to economic sciences, and the future, even more so. When Trump announced his super tariffs, he was sure that automakers would tremble and crawl to him with pleas. But what happened? GM shares fell by 3% in 3 days, and immediately recovered. Why? Because by 2024, General Motors earned more at the expense of the United States than within the country, more than $32 billion in international revenue. Trump with his rhetoric only angered those who had long worked in his government. Panic began on the American stock exchanges, investors fled like a frightened herd. On Wall Street, recently inspired by promises of domestic growth, turned into a farewell party. But GM was not there, it was already flying to this goal. And here is the question that the White House has not dared to answer: if the representative of America's automaker no longer believes in American manufacturing, why should we? Maybe the answer lies in the decisions that no one wanted to make. Trump chose to blame China, Mexico, the media, even for the worse, but never asked, what if the problem is in the model itself? GM understood before anyone else, supporting inefficient factories in the United States is not patriotism. Costs were rising, tariffs were stifling supplies, bureaucracy was multiplying, supply chains were collapsing, demand went to where electric cars are not just cozy, but where there is infrastructure, incentives, where the future does not scream, but quietly advances. While Trump tried to resurrect batteries, oils, and flags, GM installed chips, batteries, and algorithms. Anyone who understands the market will tell you, the future is not built on nostalgia. It is born from data, investment, and the courage to destroy the past. For many, the plant closures were a gut punch, especially in the Rust Belt, where workers still hold faded photos of their grandfathers on the assembly line, where pride in a homemade America is still alive. But GM made it clear, either we change or we die. And it chose change, with or without Washington. Trump, of course, did not stand aside. He stormed Twitter, screamed, declared that America was too big to be humiliated, and that he would punish GM with the might of the entire country. You know what he didn't do? He didn't go back to work. Because they're not moving to other countries, they're being displaced by robots and cloud computing. This is no longer a war of nations, it's a war of eras. Trump is stuck in 1983, and GM is living in 2035. And if you think that's an exaggeration, look at the numbers: $1 billion in factories in China, $2 billion in India, $5 billion in electric platforms. All this while Trump builds walls and waves tariffs like they're for prosperity. Now let's give this story another twist. Picture this. You wake up on a normal Tuesday, turn on the TV, and see the city where you were born, where your father worked 30 years on an assembly line, disappear from the news feed. Ford announces it's closing factories in the industrial belt, shipping their production overseas. No support, no promises to return, just a dry email. Thousands of families in Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri find out the factory they built their lives on is about to be torn down and replaced by an Amaz warehouse. When they turned to Washington for answers, they found only silence or, worse, a threat disguised as pride. Trump did not listen to the workers. He decided to yell at Ford, called it betrayal, gave tough measures, new tariffs, cancellation of contracts, a ban on sales. But Ford did not flinch, did not apologize, did not back down. It did what few dare, looked into the abyss and jumped. On paper, it looked like a blow, closing models like the Focus and C-Max, partially removing production from the United States. But in reality, it was obvious, the old can no longer be made. Electric cars are 25% more expensive to produce in America due to the prices of steel, aluminum, batteries, and components from Asia. Demand for green electric cars, Ford understood, either adapt or disappear. Thus was born the T3 project. A new generation of autonomous cars, a factory in Tennessee where 90% of the work is done by robots, a partnership with BMW to create solid-state batteries, an ecosystem without dealers and showrooms. Now you choose a car via an app, and it comes to your home. Ford is no longer just a car manufacturer, it is becoming a tech company, changing metal by code. The reaction was violent, angry headlines, outraged politicians, protesting unions. But Ford accepted the cost of threatening today in order to survive tomorrow. CEO Jim Farley challenged critics, "Do you want to lose 2,000 jobs now or 20,000 in 5 years?" Brutal, but fair. Trump shouted, threatened, waved flags, but still did not answer the main question: how to preserve jobs if the market changes its address. The world has changed. China has taken the lead in renewable energy, India has become a source of design development, Europe is handing out subsidies for innovation. Ford realized, either run or die. You thought it was at the supermarket, at the gas station, in your car, which ages faster every year. From 2020 to 2024, the price of lithium, the fuel of the future, increased by 300%, and 80% of its resale is in China. Ford had to take components from a country that Trump called an enemy, but whose market recognized as a leader. While Trump shouted, "America first," Ford played a global game of survival, not for the sake of ideology, but for the sake of mathematics. Today, Ford is closer to Silicon Valley than to Detroit. It is building a mobile platform, producing cars that travel 1,000,000 miles, charge in minutes, train algorithms. It can again become a symbol of national pride, but of a new time, connected with the future. This is possible only if any country follows the same path, stops punishing innovation and considering progress a betrayal. Who will win this war? Not a worker, not a taxpayer, not a consumer. Trump promised to keep industrial tariffs, but as it turns out, he just dug a grave into which he plugged an electric motor. GM, Ford, John Deere are just the first turns on the highway in a world without tariffs, without oil, without ideology, where success is measured not in slogans, but in gigawatts. And if you think you know who runs this world, think again. What you see on TV is just the tip of the iceberg. The real decisions, wars, and deals are hidden behind the scenes. Want to know more? Then dig deeper, because the truth does not come to you, you have to look for it.